We wish to see Jesus. This is the Passover festival of the Jews in Jerusalem long ago. Hundreds of thousands of people converging to keep the traditional remembrance of the freedom, the deliverance of the people of Israel from captivity. And as they gather to this city and to this festival, people coming from all over the Mediterranean world, and there are some Greek-speaking people. They've been hearing about Jesus, and they want to see him, to meet him, it seems. They find one of the disciples. We would like to see Jesus. And we're entering into John's Gospel in the way that John wants to describe Holy Week, what we call Holy Week, that movement of Jesus toward his death and then his resurrection. And John wants us to see Jesus. He wants us to see and understand what's happening. And we come every Sunday, in a way, to see Jesus. We want to hear what he says. We want to see what insight he gives to us. And we want to see him at that Last Supper again. As he says, "Take, eat, I'm giving you my life, take it in." And John's Gospel is just different from Matthew, Mark, and Luke. And he talks about things in a different kind of way. It's more abstract, philosophical. He doesn't sort of give you the historical blow-by-blow kind of story. And so we want to see Jesus, and the response of Jesus is, "The hour has come for the Son of Man to be glorified." Huh? Not, okay, yes, let's meet, or no, not now, or whatever it is. But see, for John, he's saying, I'm going to be glorified. I'm going to be lifted up. I will be seen. You will see me. And actually, everything about me this week. Now is the hour. This is when it's really going to be revealed who I am and what God is doing. So for John, it makes sense. He's getting us ready for Holy Week. And then he says, "Very truly I tell you, unless a grain of wheat falls to the earth and dies, it just remains a single grain. But if it dies, it bears much fruit." So there's this image. It's like there's a way of dying that creates exponential life. We want to see that. Or there's a way of living that remains sterile. Just a single grain. I had this image of a corn kernel kind of sitting forgotten on a shelf. And it just isn't going anywhere. It's not going to engage the earth and bear fruit. It just sits there. It has itself. Nothing happening. So Jesus gives this image, as John tells us, of this way of dying, of not kind of preserving yourself, but going into, he says, the earth where you fall apart. The corn metamorphosizes, it disintegrates, and then all this life comes out of it, the stalk and the grain and the ears of corn. So he wants us to have this image, see that image. And then he keeps at it. Those who love their life, that little grain of corn, those who cling to their life, preserve it, protect it, do what makes me feel good and safe, lose it. They've lost. But those who, it says here, hate their life in this world, hate their life in this world, will keep it for eternal life, keep it forever, have a life that's a forever life. But we know it's not literal. This is John's Gospel. We're not being told to hate our lives. Life is a gift. It's precious. not being told to hate ourselves. We're precious children of God. Jesus enacts that again and again and again. We know that's not the message. The Gospels correct that interpretation. But what could he be trying to show us here? What does he want us to see? And so Jesus gets very personal. He says, if you want to go where I'm going, you have to follow me. And right now, my soul is troubled. Jesus is going to get personal in John's Gospel. My soul is troubled. That word troubled isn't even strong enough to reflect the Greek. It's agitated, frantic, terrorized almost. It's a horrible feeling. My soul is troubled, says Jesus, because he sees what's coming. And what John's Gospel is doing here is giving us Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane. Matthew, Mark, and Luke describe it physically and talk about him being in agony, praying, God, take this cup away from me, this suffering. Here, John just takes the kernel of that. My soul is troubled. So what should I say? Father, save me from this hour? No. Your name be glorified. That's why I came here. That's why I live. That's what I'm all about. You be glorified, God. And so I look at what terrorizes me, but I'm going to honor you anyway. In that sense, I hate my life. I'm not going to do what feels much better to me and take off out the back end of the Garden of Gethsemane. I'm going to stay and honor you and stand as you want me to stand, even if I die. Amazing. What wondrous love is this we just sang. And for us to see this, as we're going to enact it next week, Holy Week, we need to see ourselves. And there was another garden story in the Bible, the story of Adam and Eve. It's also a symbolic story. It's not a literal story about two particular human beings. It's about humanity, male and female. And in that garden, they are with one another and they're with God, and things are right and good. There's one place, one tree, so to speak, where God says, you don't want to go there. That is a place of loss, a place of pain. Do not eat of that. Don't take that in. Don't go there. So, of course, being human beings, it's like, ooh, that looks good. We will be the decision makers. We don't really need to listen to God's wisdom. God said, that's bad for you. We're not going to honor that. We think this is going to be great. We're going to be like gods. We're going to call the shots. We're going to do our stuff. We're going to be the judges of what's good and evil. And that's the human story of human beings setting themselves up, whether in homes or governments or communities, to be the ones who decide what's good and what's evil. And it's been a great loss. There's great struggle. There's great suffering. There's great pain. And so we're invited to come and watch Jesus, who goes to his death, Holy Week. And he goes to his death not because he wants to die, not because suffering is good, because he simply always honors the Father. He will always do whatever glorifies God. And so he stands and he enters into that week, and it takes him up and it buries him. Unless a grain of wheat falls into the earth and dies, it just remains alone. But if it dies, it bears much fruit. And so at the end of today's gospel, Jesus says, when I am lifted up on a cross, and then lifted again on Easter, everyone will be able to see me, see the Father's love. Because Jesus does what you and I cannot do. He perfectly honors the Father in every way. And then he says to you and to me, he invites us to come. He will give us what he has. He gives us his life. He gives us the honor of God that he alone can create perfectly. He says, come into my life, come with me. And it honors God. And you will have that life that keeps you. And it will keep you forever. Thanks be to God.